The northbound truck was taking a left-hand bend between the Fennell Bay Bridge and Anzac Parade at 6 a.m. when the trailer carrying a 20-tonne load separated from the prime mover. Judith Ann Marsh of Arcadia Vale was driving a small sedan in the opposite direction. The rolling trailer instantly crushed the married woman to death. The driver of the semi-trailer, a 33-year-old man from Albury, was unhurt. Police directed traffic around the scene for almost 5 hours while the wreckage was cleared away and investigations carried out. It's thought that a mechanical defect was behind the accident. Police say a number of welding joints on the trailer appeared to have fractured. The death has a number of similarities to another fatal accident on the Patterson Road near Terrigal Ag College last Wednesday. A 35-year-old Maitland woman died in that incident when a 20-tonne load of wood broke free from a timber jinker. A technical report is being prepared for the coroner on that accident, but it's believed a steel pin fractured, causing the load to come adrift.
Like many small coastal towns, Terrigal is changing. That change is epitomised by a scaffold-shrouded giant dwarfing the foreshore shops, which have stood unchanged for about 40 years. Peppers on Sea, a $60 million, 210-room luxury hotel, is due to be completed by the end of the year. Though the development has progressed relatively unopposed, residents are now voicing concerns over what it represents. Spokesperson Nancy Wiley says they are afraid it will be used as a precedent for further development along the foreshore.
There's talk of the other hotel site being, developers being interested in buying that. There's also concern with rumours of high-rise going in the shopping centre at the other end of town, which would block the breeze and the view to quite a lot more people.
To gain the development, Peppers also had to agree to build a 250-space public car park, which will be situated behind the hotel. According to Nancy Wiley, however, this will not solve the town's severe parking and traffic flow problems.
I think parking's the main problem. We already have a parking problem. They're talking about putting a 4-lane road behind the hotel and a multi-storey car park there. It would be very difficult for people to get from that multi-storey car park to the shops, especially the elderly or people with young children.
Many of the residents' concerns are shared by the Terrigal Chamber of Commerce. Colin Wallace has operated a butcher's shop on the foreshore for 12 years and is Vice President of the Chamber.
The only real thing that would keep people in the area is a better supermarket and more parking. I've been in business here for 12 years and we've needed that 12 years ago and we still haven't got it.
Terrigal falls under the jurisdiction of the Gosford City Council. According to Mayor Pat Harrison, residents have nothing to fear from further high-rise development, at least in the life of her council.
And as far as I'm aware, there isn't an alderman on the council who has committed himself or herself to allowing any further high-rise in Terrigal. The Peppers development was a one-off because we had to replace the Florida. The Florida was dangerous, it had to come down and something had to be done to replace it.
Jim Gilbert had been climbing in the Watagans State Forest when disaster struck just after midday. In dense bushland, his companions watched helplessly as their friend fell 20 metres down a cliff known as the Monkey Face Lookout.
He went up to secure the rope so we could follow behind him. The rope came undone and he hit the ground and bounced off 2 rocks and he's in a bad way at the moment.
What were your first thoughts when that happened?
He's dead, so I was really worried. But being trained in rescue and first aid, I immediately knew, went straight into first aid. Skip the shock, straight into first aid.
While 19-year-old Warren Foster administered first aid, a third man, 20-year-old Eddie Hawley, went for help. Members of the Kurrambong ambulance arrived and treated Mr Gilbert at the scene for more than an hour. He was then carried by foot on a stretcher to the nearest road and was driven to a paddock off Mount Fork Road to a waiting Westpac helicopter. Those involved in the rescue included ambulance and police teams from Newcastle, Kurrambong Ambulance and SES rescue personnel and Morisset Police. Given the rugged terrain, how difficult was the rescue operation?
Very difficult. Given the amount of personnel that we had, some 16 to 20 in total, it's still extremely difficult to extricate an injured person from that location.
Mr Gilbert was flown to the Royal Newcastle Hospital where he is in a serious but stable condition. It's believed he has head and chest injuries and multiple fractures. The $1.4 million helicopter used in the rescue, a twin-engine Squirrel, is being trialled, possibly for permanent use in the Newcastle area.
Detectives say most of these goods were probably destined for Sydney when a routine inquiry uncovered an alleged underworld clearinghouse for stolen property. A man and a woman were arrested and charged in connection with the find last Wednesday. Since then, more arrests have been made after inquiries by a team of 20 detectives uncovered an extensive racket.
Initially we thought it was people only in our area, but we now realise that there's up to 3 or 4 groups have been operating as far wide as Gloucester, Murrurundi, Stroud, and up as far as Taree.
10 men aged between 19 and 36 years have been charged with stealing offences following arrests at St Ambert, Raymond Terrace, East Maitland, Talara, Rayworth and Rutherford. It's understood the stolen property is the result of at least 30 robberies, some occurring more than once at the same address. Police say their biggest problem is identifying all the items. More than 100 people have inspected the hall, but there's much more to be claimed. Last night, police uncovered another $15,000 worth of goods to add to more than 100,000 already in their custody.
If people think that some of their property is here, we don't mind at all if they would come in and have a look.
It's one of the biggest rackets uncovered in the Maitland district, but police say this type of crime will continue while there are people in the community willing to buy low-priced goods without asking questions. An unrelated incident, police at Wall's End have also made a surprising find in a Whitton Street home. Cannabis with a street value of $40,000. Police say dried leaf and seeds were stored under wardrobes and in the ceiling. Almost 5 kilos of cannabis were packed into airtight tins or plastic bags. The occupants allegedly told police they stumbled on the find in Bushland.
The 3 offenders that were arrested claimed that they found this plantation in the Barrington Tops around Christmas time. They kept it to themselves and returned to the area in February and harvested the crop and secreted it in their house. Red and green round.
3 men have been bailed to appear in Wall's End Court on the 9th of August on charges of possess, cultivate and supply cannabis.
In tonight's NBN News, a mini epidemic of asthma hits the Hunter. Ambulance officers are responding to an average of 2 emergency calls a night from sufferers. An expert tells how to avoid severe attacks.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
The shooting was reported to police at 10:20 last night by Hall's de facto wife, Christine Waters, who said she heard 3 shots, then found the body lying in a driveway. This morning, forensic police had recovered a number of spent shotgun cartridges in their search for clues. Hall was shot at a range of less than 10 metres as he emerged carrying a flashlight from his ramshackle cottage. Police say the gunman was waiting in ambush.
It would appear that he's left the front door of his premises, and as he walked out with a torch to check why dogs were barking, he was then shot down.
Hall was well known in the district, especially through his relationship with Christine Waters, stepmother to the popular boxing brothers Dean, Guy and Troy Waters. She remained in the house today assisting police. Relatives and friends were equally reluctant to comment.
I have no idea what's going on actually. I'm just here to talk to Christine.
Hall had served a jail sentence for drug offences. Police haven't ruled out a link between the shooting and a fire which gutted Hall's previous residence on Huey Road several months ago. Scientific police were unable to establish a cause for the fire. Detectives say Hall was known to local police as a small-time criminal, although he'd been fairly quiet for the past 6 months. They say their inquiries will now extend to his known associates, many of whom are scattered along the Central Coast and as far north as Newcastle. I'm Tom Hilston for NBN News.
Hello, I'm Jane Button. Tonight I'll bring you a report on a mass rally of high school students at Civic Park. The students are opposing recent changes to education by the Griner government.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
The graduate tax has been the most widely attacked of the numerous changes to the tertiary status quo proposed by the government. However, the noisy student demonstrations have as yet failed to slow its momentum. It was endorsed in principle at the National Labor Party conference held recently, which also authorised Education Minister Dawkins to prepare a costing analysis of the idea for consideration in the September budget. If accepted there, students could start paying for degrees from January next year. According to the Australian Democrats, that would also be the start of a nationwide tragedy.
And in the long term, it's really extremely damaging to Australia's future.
New South Wales Senator Paul McLean was in Newcastle today to hold strategy meetings with student union leaders. The Democrats are the only party opposing the tax and, without numbers to change policy in Parliament, are hoping to change it on the streets. They are promoting nationwide student demonstrations and raising public awareness, as well as taking a swing at the coalition for what the Democrats call political opportunism.
I mean, the opposition really is not opposing lots of things because they see themselves as the incoming government, and it's convenient for them to have the present government doing their dirty work for them, so that when we move into the campaign context, they can say we will right these terrible wrongs, or alternatively, they can go in off the scoop that's already occurred.
The government's main argument for a tertiary tax is that those who benefit from higher education should help fund it, an argument the Democrats reject as hypocritical.
We argue to the community at large as the user of tertiary education and the qualifications and expertise that people gain from their tertiary education.
One of the main arguments, of course, is that it will create extra places. Do you discount that?
They'll have extra places, they'll have empty places in universities. People are going to walk away from tertiary institutions in droves.
Walatooka means meeting place, which is essentially the centre's function. It was actually completed last year, but as it was built with a $250,000 bicentennial grant, the official opening was delayed until 1988. The centre contains a meeting hall, a classroom and office space, providing facilities for the 150 Aboriginal students enrolled at the Institute and the university. According to Institute Principal Dr. Doug Huxley, the centre is one of the main reasons the Institute's Aboriginal student retention rate has shot up from 10 to 70% in the last 4 years.
They find, because of their own culture, the need for what they talk about as an extended family support system and generally mutual support systems.
Today's ceremony was attended by local MPs and tertiary leaders. Conspicuous by their absence, however, were the Aboriginal managers of the centre. In line with Aboriginal policy towards the bicentenary, they declined to attend, a fact which Premier Griner's Parliamentary Secretary, Torres, tactfully played down.
I respect their right to think the way they do, and I can't comment on that. It's a pity, that's all I can say.
And not all attention was focused on the new building. In recent months, Mr Zammit has been travelling the state, holding talks with Aboriginal groups. Shadow Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, Laurie Ferguson, took the opportunity to fire a shot at what he calls a government charade.
I've been to a number of country centres and I've had close consultation with the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, and they're very concerned at the way in which the Premier is representing Mr Zammit is trying to intimidate people into support of a change in the current system. Threats that are being made
a view which evoked a strong defence from Mr Zammit.
They are totally and utterly, completely wrong. It's a stupid statement to make. I am going round to talk to all the Koori communities throughout New South Wales. I am not selling anything to them. On the contrary, what I'm saying is, you tell the government what you want done in Aboriginal affairs.
The lady with the jet black hair and her 7 short friends must rate amongst the most instantly recognisable characters anywhere. Since being created by the Brothers Grimm more than 150 years ago, Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs have captivated audiences around the world, and Newcastle is no exception. To the delight of children and the amusement of their parents, the characters from the latest play to be staged at the Civic Theatre met the people this morning. For the past 28 years, Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs has toured Australia and New Zealand and is making its 5th appearance in Newcastle. While the cast change, the story and costumes stay the same, a vital component in a timeless fairy tale. According to Doug Robson, who plays the King, the play owes its success to its wide appeal.
It's not a play just for the children. The children love it. It's fairyland thing. Also, there's a few things in there for the adults as well, so mums and dads don't get bored with the show.
Playing Snow White for the first time is Licia Robertson. According to the players, casting is very important in making the fairy tale work, so what, besides a taste for apples, is necessary in a potential princess?
They're looking for somebody with fair skin, obviously, because Snow White had fair skin and lips as red as blood on the snow, and also something a quality that can relate to children, somebody that can relate to the children and the children can relate to Snow White.
Morisset to follow suit, despite an order today from the Coal Tribunal to call off the strike. Miners Federation Northern Division President Jeff Brown says the action was an inevitable result of 18 months of unsuccessful talks over rationalisation of the industry.
The Coal Association have rejected the ambit log of claims that was lodged by the National Liaison Committee. They've refused to negotiate on any of the matters that are before the tribunal, and our people have just got to the stage that frustration has got the better of them, and they have called for this stoppage of the 7 days.
Regional Manager of the New South Wales Coal Board, John Hannon, says the action will only serve to make further negotiations more difficult.
I guess in around March or April we thought we were getting fairly close to a settlement. Things seem to have gone very much backwards since then, and I think the chances of negotiation at this stage have almost disappeared.
Miners' unions will hold a meeting in Sydney tomorrow to decide whether the strike will run the full 7 days. Jeff Brown says it's too early to predict the outcome of those talks.
I would be expecting that there'll be a fair bit of input from all the national officials that have been there, and the decision that will be made will be the best decision for the rank and file.
Okay, just on a breakdown of figures, locally, how many?
If you look at the area that they cover, they would neatly be inside the men's change room at Newcastle Ocean Bar. Yet one would think that it is, of course, the responsibility of the council to provide that facility. Rates have powers under the Act for this council to address the problem. I, as a mother of 2 daughters, would be very concerned. We're used to having surf life-saving clubs, and some of them do have licence provisions. This guarantees about its maintenance being an exposed scene on Newcastle Beach, but
The 2 teams, the under-13 Camarillo Cobras and the under-15 Escondido Earthquakes, both from California, arrived in Newcastle on Monday for a 14-day tour. Bad weather forced the cancellation of their first 2 matches, but the boys had some training games at the Speed Soccer Centre at Cardiff today to keep match fitness. Watched by Ken Kaiser, who has just returned from 2 weeks of coaching on the South Pacific islands of Kiribati and Tuvalu, the boys were preparing for matches against Adamstown tomorrow and the tour highlight, the Bicentennial Cup against the Newcastle and Coalfield teams on Saturday. Cobra's coach Dennis Locker said that although soccer in America is not popular in senior ranks, schoolboy soccer is a different story.
Youth soccer is very strong. There is a national organization called American Youth Soccer Organization that is comprised of children under 10 all the way up to under 19 throughout the United States.
Officials are hopeful that local teams may be able to make a reciprocal visit to California next year. Fire brigades from Windale and Charlestown were called to the fire in South Street, Windale at about 1:30 this afternoon. Kim Pratt first became aware of the blaze in her 2-storey home when a passerby noticed smoke coming from the top window. The fire brigade was called when the fire went out of control. It's believed it started under a wardrobe in an upstairs bedroom, and although police are unsure of the cause of the blaze, they are investigating the possibility that it was accidentally lit by a 6-year-old child. The top story of the house was destroyed. Nobody was injured in the fire.
Lower Hunter councils are thrilled with Premier Griner's announcement that they won't have to contribute to the $150 million Hunter sewage scheme. But the Hunter District Water Board has emerged as the big loser. It's faced with the prospect of having to raise $75 million to fund the scheme instead of $50 million as previously planned. It's also been told it will pick up the $58 million tab for upgrading sewage treatment and disposal facilities in Lake Macquarie. According to Hunter District Water Board President Alan McLaughlin, this means the board will have to raise a lot of extra revenue. He says water rates are likely to rise across the board, perhaps as much as 10%, and residents who benefit directly from the improvements are likely to pay more on top of that.
Finding the first 50 million wasn't going to be easy. To find 75 over a period of, say, about 10 years is somewhere between a 7 and 8% increase in our funding requirements.
So, the billion-dollar question, how are you going to do it?
We haven't actually worked that out yet. We're considering a number of options as to the way in which the charges should be raised, whether the people who are going to benefit from the scheme should pay a higher proportion than the general ratepayer. That's likely, I think, to be the outcome, because there's a certain logic behind that. Secondly, we have to consider as well the additional expenditure on the sewage project that the Premier announced yesterday, the Lake Macquarie sewage outfall at Belmont, where we have to find all the money for that, which is $58 million.
Mr McLaughlin says the board has not decided if it will borrow the money or whether it will raise it through upfront charges.
A lot depends on the way in which the thing's funded. We may be able to fund a lot of it from existing revenue sources. What we can't be sure about is how long we're going to have to find the money. If we've got to find it all over 10 years and we have to find it from revenue, then there will be significant increases. If we're able to borrow it on the buy now, pay later scheme, it will cost less in the immediate years, but over the long term it will cost probably more.
Teenagers Tim Moore, Nicholas Watkins and Alan Westbury set off on a 6-kilometre walk on Saturday afternoon. When they failed to reach a checkpoint, the alarm was raised. Morisset Police coordinated a search with the Cooranbong State Emergency Service and the Westpac helicopter. The boys' campfire was located late yesterday, but darkness and rough terrain prevented searchers from bringing them out until this morning. The scouts were well equipped with food and water and a lightweight tent, but heavy rain and low temperatures meant they had an uncomfortable night. They were reportedly in high spirits and good health.